they knew I had created some trust materials for myself in anticipation of my appointment. And they, they asked if they didn't have the money to be able to do it now, could they get those educational materials? Could they engage me after our appointments? And I really, I had to step back and look at everything. And my response, was, I'm not going to take any new clients after our appointments because I just won't have the time to. It wouldn't be fair. So because I've committed to helping existing clients and doing things like creating new trusts and things like that, and then really to helping people build their professional teams. And as those discussions went along, a lot of people realize that there's an installment program that you can do for the trust materials, so you don't have to wait until after the appointments. But the discussions about the professional team building, I found myself answering questions about that more and more and more. And I was like, well, you know what? This book could be really just practically a good resource and would save me a lot of time.
Sure.
And it would give people something that tangible that they can hold in their hands and refer back to. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback from people in the community who really, I was surprised because the orders for the book, they have been basically a third in the ebook and 2/3 in the print book, and I thought it would be the other way. And so it's interesting. I mean, people, even in this day and age of endless electronics, people really want to have something that they can hold in their hands and highlight and make notes and things like that. And so that's been interesting to me. And the book, I mean, it blew me away. After I rolled it out on Seeds of Wisdom and talked about it on a call with Mark Z, it really blew me away how many orders came in for the book. And then it was just a nightmare because it was, I didn't envision myself creating a website and all the things that go along with that, or even creating a book, to be honest with you. And so dealing with the technology and logistical issues of that, and it was like perfect storms. I didn't realize that e-commerce providers, at least the one that I'm using, and I've heard others as well, they accept payments into my website, but they hold the payments for 2 weeks because the website was brand spanking new and they didn't know anything about it. And so that meant that I had orders that I couldn't pay the printer for, so they're just sitting there. And then once that got cleared up, then I put in a bunch of bulk orders with the printer, and then my bank flagged them for possible fraud because it was like, well, wait a minute, generally it's in the 20s and 30s and dollars, and all of a sudden there's 100 orders,
right?
And so then I had to work through that, and then the CrowdStrike outages, they killed the connection between my website and my printer, and finally got that up, and again more bulk orders, and my bank stops everything for fraud. So it's like people have been so patient, and I am so thankful that people have understood that this was a brand new world for me, and something that I'm learning something every day. But I think at this point we've got it to the point where things are moving smoothly, and I'm getting a lot of feedback from people that they are enjoying the book. They've received the book. People get frustrated because they ordered something, and we live in the age of Amazon, right? Where it'll be delivered. They order it this morning, it'll be at your doorstep this afternoon, kind of a thing. And I'm afraid that just doesn't work in what I have set up. So I'll try and fix that, as time goes on. But for right now, this works, and
Yeah.
And people seem to be enjoying the book, and that's the most important thing to me, and finding value in the book.
So Bob, what you're telling us is you're not a book producer and shipper. That's not your expertise.
Absolutely not.
It was not intended, but it's really taken off. And I think people totally understand, what you're doing is incredible. But if we can back up just a second, if you don't mind, first of all,
Sure.
let me introduce myself. My name is Eileen, ER2. It's lovely to meet you. I have appreciated what you've shared for years. And I want to tell people a little bit about you, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, because we have a lot of new members here, and I think it's important for them to know what you bring to the table, which is pretty amazing as far as I'm concerned. Bob is a member of the Seeds of Wisdom team. He actually, going way back, he helped create the what was it? The disclaimer that's so important for creating the Seeds of Wisdom organization.
I forgot about that.
Right. So you go way back, and you've helped Salty a great deal, and the rest of us. I'm going to go ahead and just read a little bit from your bio so people know a little bit more about you. Bob's a compliance professional with extensive business, regulatory, and legal expertise. He was responsible for identifying, preventing, and recovering over $200 million in fraud and compliance-related waste for startups through Fortune 500 companies. So Bob, you're pretty good with individuals and the big wigs here. That's pretty cool. His roots are deep in technology, and he's got a very keen interest in blockchain technology as well. He's acted as a government liaison and an expert witness. He's filed applications and tariffs in all 50 states with the FCC. He's consulted on major class action litigation, negotiated complex contractual relationships locally, nationally, and internationally, pursued consumer and commercial legal claims. This one is very fascinating to me. Bob studied the impact of mortgage securitization and fraud on foreclosure claims. I bet that could be a book in itself.
Oh, God.
Probably all of this, right? He's published articles and book chapters covering a lot of his expertise that he's learned over his 28 years of doing this. Lately, the focus has been on domestic and international political and monetary developments, as it has been with a lot of us here, along with the international currency speculation that's brought us all here together today. So he's here so that we get to pick his brain a little bit and talk about this book that he was just sharing. It's called Managing Sudden Wealth Through Smart Team Building, a guide for the post-RV world. So Bob, thank you for allowing me to just kind of embellish a little bit there.
No worries. Thanks,
I just wanted people to know who we get to talk to today. And my first question was, what caused you to decide to write this book? And I think you addressed that to some degree, but was there anything else you wanted to say about why you chose to create the book?
As I fielded more questions from people, I realized that in this community, there are so many people who have never really, they've never invested seriously because they never had the means to or the interest in it. The people that are 9 to 5, whether it's corporate, you got your own business, or you're just working for somebody else, but who have decided and been drawn to and guided to this whole revaluation world, and that the potential was there as they became more and more educated on it for some people significant gains that would make them liquid at a level that they never have been before and are not prepared for. And so when I started talking about things like, well, okay, you're speculating in these currencies and you have all your stuff together as far as preparing for your appointment, but what about after your appointment? And they start talking about things like, I think I'm going to do this structure or that structure, and that kind of drove us into, well, so many of these people have never hired an attorney. never needed to hire a CPA or a trust manager or a wealth manager, investment manager, that kind of a thing. And so, we got into things like, well, how do I find them near me? How do I screen them? Hire them, manage them. And the deeper we got into the questions on these things, I went back through a lot of discussions that I had, and it just struck me that it would be easier to write the book than, because, I mean, the nature of Telegram and any chat platform, you get the same questions again and again and again.
Right.
And so the book was kind of, mom's, so the book was a way to just consolidate all that information into one place, and give people a guide that they could use that was practical in nature. So it was something that, because the nature of Seeds of Wisdom and Mark Z and the communities that I work with is international. There's things in there that, it's not just US based. It's something that is, there's information in there for the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, and all of the EU. So there's resources in there that people can use, and it does just that. It helps people to understand the process of, how do I locate any of these? So, and there's chapters on, locating, screening, hiring, and managing an attorney, a CPA, investment manager, wealth manager, trust manager, etc., paralegals, and how do you pay them? What are the typical working relationships? Depending upon what you're doing, a lot of people are looking at humanitarian projects. Are you better off hiring full time, or just putting somebody on retainer, as you understand your needs, and those needs may change. And so that was really the impetus of it. And I really started it out, not with the idea of writing a book. I really just thought, well, I'll put together, a little pamphlet. And as I got deeper and deeper into it, and, started doing the first couple of chapters, which go into a discussion of, why are we here? What about, is the RV real? And, because you get a lot of people who say, well, my family thinks I'm nuts.
Right.
And so, I just go through a lot of the things, and at this point, it's all in the mainstream media. I mean, all these things are playing out exactly. People expected it to be some big secret, explosion on the scene. And in reality, when you're talking about things like currencies and things like that, those things happen generally pretty slowly over time, unless you're dealing with things like, the George Soros, Black Monday,
Right.
where he broke the Bank of England, right? And I discussed that in the chapter, and I talk about the BRICS alliance and de-dollarization for international trade and things like that are happening right now, and kind of lay a foundation for people to understand, okay, your speculation is not crazy. And then the question is, your speculation pays off, then what? You got all this, and then, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to manage that newfound wealth, that sudden wealth that you've accumulated? And the answer is, you're going to hire professionals to do it. And so this is just a guide to help people to do that.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I love that you provided for assistance internationally as well. The best guidance you could provide for those different countries. I was impressed with that. That was a surprise when I saw the book, or when I started reading. I also appreciated the history kind of currency a little bit, and mentioning the Soros. What was funny for me is, I found myself getting emotional reading this, and yet the way you were writing it was very factual. And I'm like, thank you for staying calm, because some of that made me a little mad.
Well,
thinking,
yeah,
right?
you ride that roller coaster, and that's the
Yeah,
biggest, that's the hardest thing to deal with is the
yeah,
highs and the lows, and people jumping up out of bed in the morning every morning and expecting it's today the day, today the day,
right,
um, and like I said, don't be surprised if it doesn't happen like that. Don't be
right.
surprised if it just has something that happens. Look at what's going on right now with the dollar.
Hmm.
We're talking about inflation. We're seeing the demise of the dollar right now. We're living the demise of the dollar right now, but we don't believe it. It's
Right.
going to change, right? They're going to fix it. Donald Trump's going to get in, he's going to fix it, or Kamala Harris is going to get in, and it's going to go to Weimar Germany very quickly.
Right.
Taking a wheelbarrow full of Deutschmarks down to pick up a loaf of bread. Um, you know, that's the reality of a fiat currency,
Right.
and the reality is that many, 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 many countries are dumping the dollar and buying gold and buying silver and using their natural resources, um, that to back their currencies. And
Right.
so it's something that can make you absolutely angry. And I've studied this stuff for years and years and
Yeah.
years. So um, I don't ride that emotional roller coaster anymore. But I
Hmm.
thought it was important to provide people information that could demonstrate from very easy to understand um, circumstances happening in the world around them, that they're not nuts, and that their investments, their investments are rational. Are they going to reap untold sums? I remember early on, a woman who I had contact with, and she was excited she was going to be a quadrillionaire, and she was living in her car, and I
Oh.
was like, all
Mm.
right, well, first thing you got to do is, that may happen, and that'll be great, but first thing you got to do is you got to get out of your car, and you're not working, and you
Mm.
can work. um, you got to go to work,
Right.
and you've got to live your day-to-day life, educate yourself as much as you can, prepare as much as you can, and at the end of the day, don't ride that roller coaster because it's unhealthy.
Right. It's been heartbreaking for so many of us to see that happen. And, hey, there are days that I kind of believed that it might happen sooner rather than later. I'm awake now. I think I get it, that this is such a huge process because it is worldwide. And it dawned on me recently that not only are we waiting for these systems to be set up in the financial world, it needs to be set up to some degree in other businesses and industries, right? It's massive what we're
Oh,
hoping for.
God, no, absolutely. The kind of dynamic changes that you're talking about,
Hmm.
they're gonna change markets. They're gonna change. Uh, ultimately, um, when you switch away from fiat back to sound money, the
Hmm.
kind of money that is talked about in Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, right?
Hmm.
And I'll segue here because I was talking with my youngest daughter yesterday, who's now 30. But
uh,
she in sixth grade, we went to parent teacher conferences, and her social studies teacher came up to me and she said, "What are you teaching your children at home?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I ask this question every year with every class. I asked them, does anyone know who Roger Sherman was?" And 99.99% of the people in the world don't know who Roger Sherman was, and why would they? They don't teach about it. And so she asked the class that, and Rachel was the only one who raised her hand, and the teacher said, "Oh, Rachel, who do you think Roger Sherman is?" And she said, "Well, he wrote the 17 most important words in the Constitution." And she just lost it. And
Wow.
she's like, "Do you know what those words are, Rachel?" She said, "Yes, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in the payment of debt." I was like,
Proud moment, dad,
oh,
right?
little
Super proud.
little sponge, little
Yeah.
sponge. But but you know what it impresses upon me when I think about that is that when this happens, and it's happening now, and there may be a quick thing,
Mm-hmm.
that a quick switch over, an event that happens to make it happen very quickly, or it just may be something that happens over time. But no matter what, we're going to go back to constitutional money. And that means that you're going to go back to systems that can only deal in constitutional money. So
Right.
that means your systems of government, your systems, your legal systems, your financial systems, your tax systems, all
Mm-hmm.
those things are going to change over. And so, we talk a lot about the tax issues and the IRS and things like that. Well, I mean, the IRS was invented to and designed to basically be a big vacuum
Mm-hmm.
to pull in excess fiat money in order to keep inflation at bay. But
Yeah.
the IRS can't function in a world of real money. And so their focus is no longer going to be on income tax. It's going to be on enforcing value-added tax on new purchases of things like homes and cars and appliances, things like that.
Right.
And all the rest of these taxation schemes just go away. And the system of government, same thing. You're not going. The original Constitution said that Congress shall work it was like 6 weeks shall meet once a year, like the second week in November. I think I've got to go back and check that, but it's something along those lines. It's supposed to be a 6-week gig,
Huh.
and it turned into this, lifetime and generational, right? Well, this senator died. Well, we're gonna give his seat to his son
Right.
and his grandson, and ad
Mm-hmm.
nauseum. So those are the kinds of things that those changes will be significant, and things will just become simple, a lot simpler. All the corporate statutory things that are out there, those things end up going away because they're all based on a corporate fiat money based system that
Right.
will no longer exist. So all these restrictions on individual liberties and things like that, the power goes back to the people when you're dealing in sound money.
So with what you've just said, given your areas of expertise, do you see yourself writing another book so that you can explain to the rest of us how this is how this is impacting every pretty much facet of our lives?
That's a good question. I hadn't even gone to that. I just actually was sketching out some notes about looking at all the things that we have, at Seeds of Wisdom and pinned to my Telegram chat, all the resources that are out there dealing with issues associated with common law trusts.
Mm-hmm.
And the Weiss Handbook on Common Law Trusts is a great resource for managing and envisioning how you can manage your trust in a common law environment. And I started to sketch some things, thinking that I may do a manual that will go beyond what Weiss does and combine a lot of other resources
Okay.
and information for people, look, because there's a lot of, I mean, that's the other thing that I get all the time on my chat is people asking questions about common law trust.
Right.
And how do I create one? How do I manage one? Can I do this? Can I do that?
Yeah.
And so that may be coming. We'll see. But the one
First
you
things first.
mentioned is intriguing. Hold on, I gotta make a note.
That'd be awesome. I'll be the first person to buy. That would be so helpful. Now, I don't want to hog all this time, and I know we don't have you for too long because you're a very busy man. We have some other people on here, and we have a bunch of followers on here too. Does anyone want to hop on in and ask Bob some questions? Miss Yoki or Arjax or Salty or any of our wonderful followers?
My favorite people.
This is Salty. I'd like to do a plug for Bob Locke. He's been with me since the beginning, I think. Well, he even forgot about the disclaimer. And do you remember you had read the disclaimer? We've got it recorded and written. So he helped. If I have a question, I go to Bob. And he's like, oh, here she comes again. But this book is so valuable. It's broken down in such a simple way to understand. You can put it down, come right back to it, and you don't lose where you was. So it makes common sense. It's easy to absorb. It's very reader friendly.
It
If
is.
people do not have the book, I've got that in his documents. You can just click it and order it on the website on a PDF or, on his website. I've got it on the website. People that go into chat rooms sometimes is overwhelming to see so much. There's a doc that's just a Q&A that is just the past couple of months, something like that, with people having questions. It's broken down for them. So everything that we do, we try to make it simple. This book is a guide of simple, common sense to plan. So, Bob, I can't thank you enough for all you have done always, and your support is just amazing. And I do love the babies too.
Well, that's kind of where you and I started, right? Between babies and dogs.
I tell you, we've been together ever since. But common sense to the max. Bob Locke is your guy.
Absolutely.
And to put that in black and white, he did a beautiful job.
Agreed.
Well, and I got to tell you, I learned. I had been playing around with AI and looking to simplify different tasks and things like that, and I found that incredibly valuable and in drafting this book. I mean, I put this together in 2 months, really less than 2 months, and I never could have done it without leveraging technology and research. It's just amazing what you can do out there. So that makes me intrigued, Eileen, about that whole idea of a guide on the changing systems and how and this along the same lines. I mean, it really is just trying to put together things that share practical knowledge that people can use right away, and it amazes me. We're living in a very special time, and so don't be surprised if that ends up coming across the bow.
I couldn't agree with you more. And what frustrates me sometimes, and I bet a lot of the listeners here today, is the fact that we know so many people who don't even see this happening. They just don't. If CNN doesn't tell them it's happening, then it's not happening.
Yeah,
it's
true. It's true. And but people are waking up. I mean, to me, I don't watch the late night shows anymore because they're just too biased.
Yeah.
But when I saw a clip of Stephen Colbert interviewing Dana Bash, and he straight faced said something about CNN being objective, and his entire audience just erupted in laughter. And I was like, okay, well, these people are totally biased the other way, but they get it. They understand.
It's encouraging. Yeah. Very, very encouraging.
So maybe there is some hope.
I hope so. I really. But in the meantime, we're just going to keep on keeping on. In fact, I was going to ask you, other than, of course, the amazing research that Seeds of Wisdom team does, our Jax in particular, she's amazing, and Miss Yoki and Salty. Where do you go to find information on? I mean, you said earlier that it's you can see it everywhere, but some people aren't seeing it. So where are you seeing things most?
Well, I mean, to me, I grew up when I became a lawyer. It was in the infancy of computerized legal research. So the early Westlaw and Lexis, they were just a tremendous revolution in legal research capabilities. And now you're living in a world of ChatGPT and Perplexity and all these different tools out there for different things. It really depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what area that you may be researching in. To me, I really like Perplexity. Perplexity.ai is a tremendous tool because it has the ability to go out and search the entire internet for topics that you're interested in. And so, I mean, I've started to, you know, if I do, normally I would just do a Google search on something. Somebody asks me a question and I don't know the answer to it, I do a Google search. Well, I can go on to Perplexity and it'll go way beyond what Google will do.
Wow.
And feed it back to me in obviously the key in using any of those tools is taking the time to develop what they call the prompt, give the computer direction. But the
Right.
cool thing is that the more that you use it, the system starts to adapt to your voice, adapt to your focus, adapt to the way that you like things or the kind of questions that you ask. And so you get smarter and smarter and more detailed answers.
Hmm.
And you have to be realistic about what it can do. I've read these horror stories about attorneys going out and using ChatGPT and writing legal briefs and things that they don't check,
Oh,
submitting them to court, and a judge does check and sanctions them for wasting the court's time because they went to ChatGPT. ChatGPT came up with all kinds of interesting looking quotes and citations and things like that, but they were all just fantasy. They weren't real.
wow.
And that's a nightmare. So you have to be intelligent in how you use these things. But once you do, it's for a researcher, it's just a joy because you can go off and accomplish so much more in terms of building your research foundation and verifying it,
Wow.
validating your sources and things like that so much more quickly than in years past. So it's a good time for
That,
researchers.
that is valuable, Bob. What you just said, I can feel light bulbs going off for many of our listeners.
No, that's it, because
Yeah.
all of a sudden you sit there and you say, okay, well, I can, so I started out using the free version of ChatGPT,
Hmm.
and it's great.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always go out and search the internet. It'll go through its database, which is substantial.
Hmm.
Um, but when you want to get beyond that, then you look at other tools, and there are different tools for whatever your focus is. And
Hmm.
then the light bulbs go on. I mean, you just sit there and I scribble down notes and it's like, okay, well, let me check this out. Right.
Yeah.
And so now I'm, on the website, I just added a blog page that is not really active at this point, but I sketched out a bunch of areas that I wanted to do blog posts on, and books and things that interest me
Yeah.
that I talk about when either on the chat or when I'm talking with Mark Z or somebody else, and want to turn people onto these books, these resources. So you'd think about your initial question, talking about a book about the new systems. I love talking about books that have helped me to kind of find my way down
Hmm.
this path and figure out where the systems went wrong, where they deviated from our constitutional principles, and those things are not easy. A lot of those things are not easy to find. The sources and things like that are not easy to find. And
Hmm.
to me, the epitome of that is I had been looking for different documents for years, and I don't know how, but I came across a book by Anna von Reitz, and it intrigued me,
Hmm.
and I bought it, and she had all these documents that I've been looking for, and I'd go to law libraries. I mean, anywhere where I was traveling, I'd end up in a law library somewhere looking for different documents that had been suppressed, and she had found them, and it caused me to send her an email and
Wow.
introduce myself, and that developed a years long friendship, and we've collaborated on some things. I've spent some time up in Alaska with her and a group of other former attorneys and researchers and paralegals and things like that. And so anyway, that's going to be the focus of the blog, but it's going to be all kinds of things. It's going to be
Yeah.
history. It's going to be culture. It's going to be, social trends, medical technology. I mean, I've got a bunch of things that I'm interested in that people have talked to me about, in the chat and in other forum.
Right. Amazing. That name, Anna von Reitz, I hadn't seen her name in a while, but I remember reading some of her documents early on, and it was above my pay grade because I'm not an attorney, not
Oh,
legally,
she's brilliant.
but she's amazing.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's
And
really,
a really, really sweet person. I mean,
yeah.
she talk about a prolific writer. It's insane how much she puts out. And,
Yeah.
and she's this tiny woman, and she scurries about, and she's got papers everywhere, documents and books, and she just, collaborating with her is always a joy.
Wonderful. Oh, I feel like I'm hogging the conversation again. Is there anyone out there that wants to ask a question of Bob? I know Arjax had mentioned something earlier, but I'm not sure if she's with us. Arjax.
Yeah. Yes, I am here. Hi, Bob. It's good to see you.
It's nice to see you.
I tried to buy your book, and I went in to your website, and I filled out the form to buy the book, and then it said something like I had to sign in. And when I went to go to sign in, I couldn't find any place to even make an account to be able to sign in. So I had that problem. So could I just email you and you can help me with getting a book?
I can walk you through. Oh, of course, that. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't heard that. Generally, it's weird because in my position, I put in a test order when I first rolled out the website, and I haven't had to go into those inner workings since then. And it was really just putting in my name, address, telephone number, email address, and then billing information, and then it flows from there right through to the printer. So yeah, pop me an email and we'll figure.
Yeah, because I want to buy extras of your book too, because I have some people that want the book and they can't afford it, so I'm going to get a couple of them.
Yeah, it's funny because people have asked me about it, and people that have nothing to do with anything that we're discussing. And they're just like, well, you wrote it, then how do I get a copy? And I'm like, why? I don't really know how much you're going to enjoy, professional team building, but, this is where you go, kind of a thing, right?
Well, I know it's going to be useful for a lot of people because, we're going to need this information as soon as we have all of this money. We're going to need to know what to do. And I particularly want to get the hard copy so that I can really take notes and keep it for my own reference forever.
No, and I hear that from people. Like I said earlier, Arjax, it's one of those things where I thought for sure that more people were going to want the ebook than a hardcover book, and in reality, it's been like 2/3 hardcover and a third ebook, and then there are a lot of people that did both just because they wanted to have the ebook right away. They wanted to have something that they can handle, and then they wanted to have that hard copy. And so I put after each chapter that deals with locating, screening, hiring, and managing different professionals. So after the chapter on attorneys or CPAs or whatever, there's a couple of pages of just lined pages for people to make notes, so that they can carry that with them. And if they have, I thought just it would be a utility for people who have projects that they're that they're using the book to help them develop their teams, that kind of thing. And it really, I think I hope it's going to cut the time short for that people will need to invest in order to build their teams and get started with their projects. Because I know the majority of the people that I talk to are exactly as you describe yourself. They've got all this stuff is going to be there and want to hit the ground running. And where do I go? What do I do? Kind of a thing. And so this is designed just to kind of make this particular part of the process a little bit easier and kind of, a little hand holding, a little, gentle guidance. So I appreciate your interest, obviously.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it, to be honest with you, because I don't have any of this information and I need to get it. And you're putting it all in one place for us so we can just read your book and take notes and contact people as we get to a specific paragraph or chapter in your book, and we'll just go from there. I mean, because I know nothing about what to do after we get this money.
Right. And you know what? I mean, it's like I said, it's kind of, a work for, hand holding people, here's a set of questions that you can ask when you're screening somebody, whether it's an attorney or a CPA, a paralegal, whatever. And then understanding that each individual is going to have a different focus. And so, so this is kind of start with the general in terms of your questions, to the professionals. And then from there, get deeper into the specifics of why you're hiring this particular professional. You're hiring to help you work through the details of a contract, to handle the purchase of, a ranch, or a home. What is it that you need? And then each individual can kind of take off from those basic sets of questions and get deeper into their own particular circumstances.
And I think that's great that you've got okay, go ahead, Salty. I'm sorry.
I think you ought to have the audio version too.
Somebody had said that to me. You know what? I have it on a list. We'll see what
in your spare time.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Speaking
one of the topics that you brought up in your room that you addressed really well was about projects. And somebody had asked you about the Zim. Do I have to have a project? Do you want to cover that?
Yeah, that's one of those things where people have had, there's a lot of people that are older, and they don't necessarily, they may put some of the money into other people's projects, but they don't necessarily want to do it themselves. And so the whole thing started with, do I need to have a trust? And, because there's a lot of people out there who are operating under the misconception that a trust is required even for the currencies, and that's just not true. And the only time that I have ever heard consistently where a trust is required is with respect to people who want to redeem their Zim at a higher contract rate in order to pursue projects. And because they're getting a lot more money, the trust is required by the financial institutions for monitoring and oversight of the spending of the money. They want to make sure that if they're giving this higher rate, that money is going towards the projects that they're dedicating that money for, and not just going into somebody's pocket, into their lifestyle. And so other than that, if you're just redeeming Zim, you can walk in there just like you would with your currencies, and just do it personally. You'll get a lower rate. Nobody really knows right now what the rate is. There's a lot of speculation out there. And so I tend not to look at that stuff at all. I really just look at it more in terms of it's going to be substantial. It's going to be more liquid than you necessarily have ever had to deal with before,
Right.
and kind of take it from there and plan accordingly.
Wonderful. No, Bob, what do you say to clients of yours that you've maybe did trust for a couple of years ago, thinking, we were all thinking it was, right around the corner, and if they're
Sure.
discouraged, what do you say to those who are feeling discouraged or wondering if maybe this isn't going to happen at all?
Well, I mean, really, just people that looked at this stuff years ago who were really, out on the bleeding edge of these discussions, and we're told that it was gonna happen, in the next week. It was going to happen this weekend, and like I said, you and I were talking about riding that roller coaster, right? The nice thing about where we are right now is that all of those, what do I want to say? If you just look in the mainstream media, all right, and you look at what is being reported in terms of the BRICS alliance and their migration, their de-dollarization, their migration away from the dollar as an international trade currency.
Yeah.
And what's going on in Iraq on a daily basis in terms of, because I started watching some of these Iraqi business feeds and the projects that are going on there and the systems that they're putting into place.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is preparing for revaluation. Is it going to happen as a single day event, or is it just something that's going to roll out over time? In my mind, rolling out over time makes more sense. It's always been that way in the past. I mean, so the discussion that I had in the book on looking as a corollary to Iraq, looking at what happened with Kuwait, and it happened over time. There were a lot of people that speculated in Kuwaiti currency that were incredibly successful.
Yeah.
They had to wait a couple of years, for that to happen. But then all of a sudden they picked up this thing for nothing, and it came out at $3.78 for each unit. So, two things I would say to people, Eileen. One, don't stop living your life waiting on this stuff to happen. You have it, put it someplace safe, hang on to it. Don't listen to the naysayers, because you're talking, and generally it's people that have never taken a risk in their life, right? But you're not talking about ridiculous amounts of investment, and the potential returns are significant. The returns are happening right now. I mean, I bought 3 Zim 100T notes back in 2010, and I bought them as a joke. Okay, I was in a coin store across the street from the Daily Center, from the courthouse in Chicago, where I just gotten out of court, and I was waiting for guy to come back with something, and I looked in the case, and there's these 100T Zim notes, and I just kind of chuckled, and there's this old Hasidic Jewish guy behind the counter, and I looked at him and I said, "Are these real?" and he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Wow, that's where the dollar's going." And he shook his head, and he was like, I said, "Well, how much are they?"
Yeah.
And so I got 3. They were $10 a piece. So I got 3. I had 2 buddies that were bankers that were awake, who understood the way the system really worked, and so I sent one to each of them, because we had just gone on a ski trip together and had been talking about monetary policy and the Federal Reserve and things like that, and so I just sent it to them just as kind of a joke, and I slipped mine underneath the plastic thing on my desk guard on my office desk, and I had it there forever. And then things started happening, and I was like, I should probably put this in the safe. and if I wanted to buy those 3 Zim today, they would cost a whole lot more than $10 a piece.
Right. Right.
I mean, you're talking about in the hundreds, and
right.
So is it conceivable as we go to an asset-backed currency structure throughout the world that those Zim bond notes are going to be worth more, that the Iraqi dinar or the Vietnamese dong or the bolivar are going to be more. Well, you're talking about countries that have significant physical assets, mineral wealth,
Right.
and physical gold that they can use to back those currencies. And so it's happening.
Yeah.
It is happening. I mean, it's happening every single day. And now, they're talking about inflation. Well, I went to the grocery store the other day, and I looked at my wife and I was like, you just spent $150, and last year or a year and a half ago, it would have been 75.
Right. Right.
And so that's where your currency's going.
Yeah.
And it's not going to slow down. It's just going to accelerate over time, because that's the nature of fiat monetary systems. Once you get into this kind of the de-dollarization that the BRICS are
Right.
doing, that's going to be the main impetus. But it's also profligate spending by the pseudo communists that are holding the purse strings right now.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really helpful, Bob. I appreciate what you've said there. I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that as well.
Yeah, people are frustrated.
Yeah. But at the same time, living your life is probably the best we can do. Yes, it's much more expensive right now. It's not always going to be this way. I have to hold on to that.
Oh, no question.
I
mean, eventually it collapses, and then the question is what rises out of it.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, I tell people, if you have the ability, go buy some junk silver.
Right.
You don't have to put a whole lot of money into it, and you don't have to buy, $1,000 face of junk silver. I've done that at times to have that, but just go to a coin shop and tell them you want to buy some junk silver. Tell them you want to buy $100 worth,
right,
$200 worth, whatever, and then just keep it.
Right.
Because silver is going to be is going to go up, appreciate more than gold is over time.
Right. Because of the uses of it.
Just the industrial uses, exactly.
Yeah.
But in terms of things like, at some point the dollar has real serious problems, and that's why they're trying to get us onto the central bank digital currencies right now. Easier to control easier to control the inflation issues. Kamala's talking about putting in Soviet-style price controls, which is a disaster.
Right.
So, but you know what? If you've got a little junk silver, you've got something to go down to the store and you can present it to a shopkeeper, to buy whatever essentials, right? And they're going to want to have that a whole lot more than they're going to want to have that paper dollar.
Absolutely. What you just said made me think, wow, we could spend a whole hour discussing just, what is happening, and if those kinds of price controls are put into place, are we a market economy ourselves? Right? It's like,
oh yeah.
Really?
No. I mean, you can't pick one.
Yeah.
You can't have them both.
No, definitely not. So speaking of that, I'm looking at the time here, and I know you've been so generous. Do we get you back? How soon can we get you back to talk to us?
Yeah, you know what, Salty and I are going through that right now, and what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to bake it into my schedule. So my thinking is I'd like to do something maybe every couple of weeks is possible. If we could do that, I mean, we talked about once a month. I don't know if I could do once a week, but let's shoot for a couple of weeks out, and I've got some thoughts, and you and I can develop some questions and things, to talk about, and yeah, I'd be happy to.
That's wonderful.
And this is perfect. An hour is perfect. If I can bake that into my schedule, then we can prepare, and we can make it chock full of good stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob.
Absolutely.
on everybody's behalf here. I wish people had raised their hands, but it could be that you're just answering all their questions already. So, or you'll find them in your room.
I was just going to say, I know I'll see it on chat.
Absolutely. You'll be extra busy. But I don't want to keep you much longer. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. This has been our inaugural, what are we calling it? Currency, Facts, and Truth podcast that will now be on YouTube. So you'll get
Cool.
famous now on YouTube, Bob. I know you're probably already there more than you would like to be. But we appreciate you joining us today. And I look forward to scheduling the next one. I'll leave it to you and Salty to work out the details, and then you and I can get together and come up with a plan.
You got it, Eileen. It's a pleasure to meet you.
And lovely to meet you as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you want to read more about Bob, learn more about him, we do have a Bob Locke room here in Seeds of Wisdom on Telegram. It's an awfully busy room, and there are lots of questions answered. I highly recommend, if you've never been there, join it and read for a while, because you might get a lot of your questions answered that way by other people. But it's a wonderful room, and it's a very busy room, thanks to Bob's generosity.
It's fun. Good
and
group
you
of
can
people.
also, I'm sorry?
Good group of people.
Yes, they are. I learn a lot from the questions, a lot, because sometimes I don't even know what questions to ask. So it's very helpful to me. You can also get more information about Bob at therealboblocke.com. You can find us here at Seeds of Wisdom at www.seedsofwisdomteam.com, or find us on Telegram at Newshound News or Q&A RV Classroom, two of the other good rooms within Seeds of Wisdom. There's much more to cover, but I think, wow. Salty, do you have any other announcements you'd like to make before we let Bob Locke go?
No, I think y'all covered it all, and I just thought y'all did a great interview. I'm glad that Arjack was able to jump in with as busy as she is.
Yeah.
But it is a pleasure always, Bob, and ER. Thank you so much for hosting the call today.
My pleasure.
So we'll end it, and we'll see everybody in the Telegram rooms.
Thanks.
You guys have a great weekend.
You too, Bob.
You too. Thank you a bunch.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.